For one night in the summer, California politics take a backseat to America's pastime. It's the traditional Democrats versus Republicans legislative softball game, the proceeds from which go to charity.
We got to be communicating to one another out there. Wherever the ball's going, we got to be talking, hey guys, go to first, go to second.
This softball game has for years seemed like an anomaly in Sacramento. Here, Republicans, not Democrats, dominate.
That's fiscally conservative.
All right.
Three up, three down.
They won this game and almost every game for the past few years. And even more surprising, legislators seem to actually like each other. It's hugs and handshakes all around.
Thank you.
It's quite the contrast to their day jobs at the state capitol, which is why the session of the California legislature that ended last week was so notable.
The tone of how we conduct our work is changing immensely and in very positive ways.
We have developed, I think, a real sense of a class identity.
I mean, we disagree certainly, rather robustly at times, but we get along pretty well.
To the Constitution of the United States.
In fact, many members of the Assembly's freshman class who took the oath of office just 2 years ago see things in a way few California legislators have in the modern era. One big reason is 2012's Proposition 28, longer term limits of up to 12 years in either house. The shorter term limits imposed back in 1990 offered little time to govern, says Democratic Assemblymember Marc Levine.
Legislators, one house or the other, they've known that they've got an expiration date, essentially. So they're looking to run for that other house, the Assembly or the Senate, or to Congress, or even a statewide office. And it means that they're looking more short term. They're basing their legislation on how to get to that next job, and that hasn't been good for us.
Now, says Republican Assemblymember Melendez, there's motivation to act differently.
It's a personal element, so you get to know one another, you become friends, and then I think you're more likely to open up your ears and really listen when they come to you with a piece of legislation that they want you to support.
You have to go back to 1966, the year that Ronald Reagan beat Pat Brown in the race for governor, to find a freshman class of this size elected to the California legislature. This class, of course, was elected in 2012, the same year that the voters relaxed and changed the term limits law about how long you can serve in the state capitol. The voters had already changed the primary rules in California and the way the political districts are drawn. Combine all that together and you may get something that almost never happens in Sacramento. Real change.
You're seeing movement away from that gridlock, movement away from that inability to deal with the state's most basic issues.
Steve Boilard, who heads up the Center for California Studies at Cal State Sacramento, says that movement may change the political power structure of the Capitol. That power structure for more than 2 decades has been dominated both by the lobbyists, who linger in the State House hallways during every major vote, and by legislative staff who've often been here 2 or even 3 times longer than elected politicians. This group of legislators may change that, says Democratic Assemblymember Susan Eggman.
The context has changed. Like, lobbyists, different advocate groups, they know that we're going to be around for a while. And so I think just in that, people have sort of held back a little bit to see how are we going to interact with this new class.
They're demanding more answers, more information. They're looking at the longer term. And over time, I think it will give them a tremendous amount of power, accumulating the expertise and the relationships that come from spending a long time in office.
Relationships. These newest legislators say the personal can help soften the partisanship that has in the past stifled just about everything else.
I look at it, and I think many of my colleagues do, that I'm going to look at you for 12 years. So it's not in my best interest to make an enemy of you in the very beginning, nor is it in your best interest.
The negative impact of single-use plastic bags is well documented.
Even so, there are still serious disagreements. The difference, says Assemblymember Marc Levine, is how those disagreements are handled. It's something he says he discovered from Republicans during the debate over one of his bills this year.
I actually had freshman members come to me and say that they were asked to speak against my bill, that they weren't going to vote for it, but that they were refusing to speak on the floor against. And I think that says something about the relationships that we're building and the long-term thinking that we're putting into our legislation as well.
It does seem like there's a genuine cooperative spirit. And the question is that just a one-time thing by this particular mix of members, or is it a more long-term trend that's coming about as a result of these various reforms that have gone into effect?
All members vote who desire to vote.
It's also hard to know how to measure change at the state capitol. Will a new era mean more bipartisan voting on bills, or Simply more bipartisan work on the biggest issues facing the state. A number of legislators point to what happened in August, a bipartisan deal on a new water bond on the November ballot, a $7 billion plan to ensure long-term reliability of water sources across California. The bond passed by an almost unanimous vote in both houses.
And we got Democrats and Republicans that are more unified than I've ever seen probably in my life. So with that,
There weren't a lot of floor speeches. There wasn't a lot of argument. It was just, here's what we've got, let's get it done.
And this freshman class of legislators could change the balance of power between their branch of government and that led by the governor. Jerry Brown is the most seasoned politician in Sacramento, but the next governor after Brown will likely be a rookie compared to a legislature that by then may have almost a decade's more experience in the Capitol.
Over time, we're going to see the legislature reasserting itself as a more powerful player in the process.
And maybe that's why the freshmen who played in this charity softball game were the real MVPs. How they work through their differences will be key. Perhaps more compromise and less of a tendency to just run up the score. That's the kind of hustle for which Californians everywhere seem to be longing.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.